Have you ever wondered how these massive global companies handle really turbulent times? Especially when you've got new leadership stepping in right when economic pressures are mounting?
Yeah, it's a fascinating dynamic.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive into exactly that kind of story. We're
Mm.
looking at Stanley Black Decker's second quarter 2025 earnings call and their related financial reports.
Right. And our mission today, it's really to get past just the surface level numbers. We want to pull out the crucial bits of knowledge, the real insights from their recent performance, their strategy shifts, and what they see coming down the road.
Exactly. So you, the listener, can get a really solid understanding fast.
We're aiming to give you the full picture.
Yeah, not just the data points, but the story behind them. We'll be focusing on some big leadership changes, a huge company-wide transformation they're undergoing, the whole tangle with tariffs, and honestly, some pretty fascinating innovation that's changing how work gets done.
Lots to unpack there.
Definitely. Let's get started. So right out of the gate, there's this really significant leadership transition happening. Donald Allen Jr., he's stepping down as CEO effective October 1st, 2025. He's moving into an executive chair role.
Right.
And Chris Nelson, who was the COO and president of Tools and Outdoor, he's taking over as the new CEO. I mean, for a company this size, that's a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
What does the timing suggest, especially with this major transformation already in progress?
It's absolutely a pivotal moment. And what's interesting, Don Allen himself basically said he thinks now is the perfect time for this handover.
Okay.
Yeah, largely because they've made, significant headway on this huge company transformation that they kicked off back in mid-2022.
Right.
And Chris Nelson, the incoming CEO, he sounded really enthusiastic about working with the teams globally to unlock the potential of their brands and, grab more market share.
Yeah.
So it signals kind of strategic continuity, but definitely with some fresh energy.
That makes sense. Yeah. And speaking of that company-wide transformation, it's a term we hear a lot, right? But for Stanley Black Decker, what does that actually mean on the ground? It sounds almost like rebuilding the plane while it's flying.
That's actually a pretty good analogy. It is monumental. This isn't just minor adjustments. They're fundamentally re-engineering things based on several core pillars.
Okay.
So first, they're stabilizing, simplifying, and really focusing the organization, sharpening the focus.
Got it.
Second, they're working hard to improve their cost position, lean into their core strengths, and importantly, prioritize investments that drive organic growth, growth from within.
Uh-huh.
Third, they've put together a really strong management team. It's a mix of deep internal experience and some fresh perspectives from outside hires. Fourth, portfolio streamlining. They've actually divested about $2.6 billion worth of revenue to really zero in on their main areas: tools and outdoor and engineered fastening.
Okay, shedding some weight.
Exactly. Fifth, big improvements in their cost structure and strengthening the balance sheet that comes from operational priorities they set way back in mid-2022. And finally, there's a real commitment to fostering a growth-oriented culture, driving innovation, and delivering, new value-added solutions for their customers.
Wow, that's a lot. And it's all aimed at some pretty ambitious goals, right?
Absolutely. They're shooting for a 35% plus adjusted gross margin and hitting a specific deleveraging target, basically, reducing their debt originally planned for 2026, though that timeline has shifted slightly, which we'll get into.
Okay, so with all that strategic groundwork laid and this leadership transition happening, how did Stanley Black Decker actually, perform in Q2? What do the hard numbers tell us about their current health amidst all this change?
Well, the Q2 results, they really show a company holding its own in a pretty tough market. Revenue landed at $3.9 billion. That's down 2% compared to last year, or 3% organically if you adjust for things like currency fluctuation.
And what drove that dip?
The main things were a slower buying season for outdoor products and also what they called non-typical shipment disruptions. Basically, some unusual delays getting products shipped out, which they linked to customer reactions around tariffs.
Ah, the tariff effect again. But there were some bright spots, weren't there? I remember reading something about DeWalt.
Absolutely. DeWalt was a definite highlight. The brand continued to grow, really supported by pretty resilient demand from professionals. In fact, DeWalt has shown consistent top-line growth for well over 2 years now.
2 years, wow.
Yeah, across every product line, every region. So that's a key strength. Now, looking at margins, the adjusted gross margin came in at 27.5%.
Okay.
That is a decline from the previous year. And the big culprits were, again, tariffs. They estimate about a 3-point hit to gross margin there, and also just lower overall volume. But importantly, they managed to partially offset that with efficiencies they're getting from the supply chain transformation we talked about, and also some initial price increases they put through. And here's a crucial point. The company stated they view Q2 as the low point for gross margin, assuming, no massive new government policy changes. That's a pretty bold call given all the global uncertainty.
It is. What about other profitability metrics?
Sure. Adjusted EBITDA margin, that's earnings, before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization, a good measure of operational profitability was 8.1%. That's down year over year, mainly due to those gross margin pressures and some investments in growth, but again, partly offset by targeted cost control.
Okay.
Adjusted earnings per share, EPS, landed at $1.08. That figure did include a one-time discrete tax benefit, so worth noting.
Got it.
And maybe most impressively, free cash flow was strong at $135 million. That's pretty solid, especially when you consider the operational hurdles from these new trade policies.
So connecting the dots, even with market wobbles, their first half adjusted gross margin was almost flat compared to last year.
Exactly. It was 28.9%, only 20 basis points behind the prior year. It really signals how focused the whole organization is on fighting back against those tariff impacts.
Okay, let's really dig into that. The tariff tangle. This is clearly a huge headwind. Just how significant are we talking financially, and what's their actual battle plan to deal with it?
Oh, the impact is staggering, frankly. The company estimates that the annualized gross cost of tariffs before they do anything to mitigate is around $800 million.
$800 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's complex. This isn't just China tariffs. Their assumptions include things like 30% incremental tariffs on goods from China, another 30% on goods from Mexico that don't meet USMCA rules. That's the trade deal replacing NAFTA.
Right, the U.S.-Mexico-Canada agreement.
Exactly. Plus over 20% on goods from the rest of the world, and those 50% Section 232 tariffs on metals. It's coming from all sides.
Goodness. So what does that translate to on the bottom line?
For 2025, they expect the net negative hit to earnings per share after factoring in mitigation costs and timing to be about 65 cents a Fed. And that includes challenges like managing constraints on rare earth materials, which are crucial for motors and electronics. It's hitting almost every part of their global supply chain.
Okay, $800 million gross impact, 65 cents off EPS net. That's serious. So what's the plan? How do you fight something that big and complex?
They've laid out a very clear four-pronged strategy.
Okay.
First, customer focus. Seems obvious, but it's key. Prioritizing serving customers and end users, making sure they have the right products, maintaining high service levels, keeping supply chains flowing smoothly despite the disruption.
Makes sense. Keep the customer happy.
Second, supply chain adjustments. This is a big one. They're aggressively accelerating moves to use their North American manufacturing footprint more and get more products compliant with those USMCA rules we mentioned.
Shifting production.
Exactly. The really ambitious goal here is to get their production in China for the U.S. market down to less than 5% by 2026.
Less than 5%. That's a huge shift from where many companies are.
It is. Third prong, judicious price actions. They are raising prices, but they say they're doing it carefully with a long-term view, aiming to protect their cash flow, their EBITDA, and their overall margin structure. They did one increase back in April 2025. And they're planning a second, more modest increase, maybe about half the size of the first one, for early Q4 this year.
Okay. And the fourth part?
Government engagement. They're proactively talking to the U.S. administration, making sure their perspective and interests are, considered as trade policy gets made or adjusted.
Right, trying to influence things where they can. Now, you mentioned pricing. They found something interesting about how price increases affect volume, right?
Yeah, this is really crucial. They observed what they called a one-for-one relationship. Basically, for every percentage point they increased prices, they saw a corresponding percentage point drop in sales volume.
Oh, wow. So basically, price hikes are directly costing them sales volume in this market.
Pretty much. It raises a really important question, right? What does this mean for future revenue growth? How do you balance protecting your margins today versus potentially losing market share long term if your competitors don't follow suit or if customers just buy less?
That's a super tricky balancing act. They need those price hikes to offset the tariffs, but they can't afford to lose too much ground on volume.
Exactly. It puts even more pressure on innovation, like that DeWalt M suite we'll talk about, to provide value that justifies the price, or finding new customer segments, or just hoping competitors face the same pressures. It's a real tightrope walk.
Okay, so we've covered the immediate financial pressures like tariffs. But you mentioned this massive internal transformation too, this $2 billion global cost reduction program. Let's unpack that. Where are those savings actually coming from?
Right. This is the proactive piece, not just reacting to tariffs. The big goal is $2 billion in pre-tax run rate cost savings by the end of 2025.
And how far along are they?
Pretty far, actually. Since they started this back in mid-2022, they've already locked in about $1.8 billion in savings.
$1.8 billion out of $2 billion. That's impressive progress.
It is. In Q2 alone, they added about $150 million to that run rate total. And these savings, they come from several key areas, or value streams as they call them.
Like what?
Well, there's material productivity. That means smarter sourcing, using contract manufacturers more effectively. Then there's operational excellence, redesigning how things work inside their plants, using lean manufacturing principles to cut waste.
Standard efficiency stuff, but sounds like on a massive scale.
Exactly. Another huge one is footprint rationalization. This is about transforming their whole manufacturing and distribution network. It includes closing some sites, consolidating others, and setting up specialized centers of excellence.
Okay, optimizing where things get made and stored.
Right. And finally, complexity reduction. This involves things like designing products around common platforms and, importantly, reducing the sheer number of different products, or SKU stock-keeping units that they have to manage. Fewer variations means simpler manufacturing, simpler inventory.
That makes a lot of sense. So $1.8 billion achieved?
Yep.
But getting that kind of savings, especially so fast, surely comes with, some internal disruption. What were the likely trade-offs or challenges?
Oh, absolutely. You don't achieve that kind of number without making some tough decisions. Site closures, restructuring teams, reallocating resources, that inevitably causes disruption and requires really intensive management focus.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But the flip side is what you highlighted earlier. The simplified supply chain, leaner operations, it actually gives them more agility now.
How so?
Well, fewer moving parts means fewer points where things can break down. It allows for faster decision-making. And critically, it gives them the flexibility to adapt more quickly to things like changing trade policies, like shifting production from China to North America, which they're doing aggressively.
So the cost-cutting itself helps them navigate the external shocks like tariffs better.
Precisely. It's that operational discipline that lets them kind of juggle both mitigating the tariff hit while still delivering on these big cost reduction targets. It's quite the undertaking.
Okay, so let's zoom in a bit. How are the two main business segments, tools and outdoor and engineered fastening, actually performing amidst all these cross-currents?
Right. Let's start with tools and outdoor. Overall, revenue there was down 2% or 3% organically. But as we mentioned, the real star continues to be DeWalt Professional Products.
The yellow and black tools.
Yep. Consistent top-line growth, resilient demand, going strong for over 2 years now. That's the engine.
But other parts were weaker.
Yeah, there was some softness elsewhere. Hand tools saw a 5% organic decline, which they largely attributed to those tariff-related shipment disruptions we talked about earlier.
Okay.
And outdoor products, think lawnmowers, trimmers, down 7% organically.
Yeah.
That was mainly due to a slow start to the buying season across the market, although they did mention things picked up a bit in July. Importantly, they don't think they're losing market share here. They see it more as a market-wide issue.
What about Craftsman? That's a big brand too.
Yeah, Craftsman tends to play more in the DIY segment, which was generally more affected than the pro side, but they did mention seeing opportunities to expand the Craftsman assortment, especially in power tools.
And the profitability for tools and outdoor.
The adjusted segment margin was 8.0%. That's down from 10.4% the previous year. The main reasons were those tariffs again, lower overall volume, and also investments they're making in growth initiatives. Partially offset, of course, by the cost savings and pricing actions.
Okay, got it. What about the other segment, engineered fastening?
Yeah.
Used to be called industrial, right?
Exactly. Engineered fastening, their revenue was also down slightly, 2% overall, or just 1% organically. But the story here is really interesting because it's quite varied.
How so?
The standout performer was their aerospace business. Huge growth, over 20% organically. They hit a new high, like a $400 million annualized run rate, and they have a really solid multi-year backlog of orders.
Wow, aerospace is booming for them.
Absolutely. It's a high-margin, very sticky business. You get designed into a plane, you're likely there for a long time.
Makes sense, but other parts weren't doing as well.
Right. They saw declines in automotive, which was down mid-single digits, and also in general industrial, down high single digits.
Why was that?
Primarily due to Auto manufacturers reducing their production schedules, and also just general caution from industrial companies leading to restrained capital spending. OEMs holding back a bit.
Okay. And the margin picture for engineered fastening.
Adjusted segment margin was 10.8%. That's a decline from 13.5% the previous year. The main reason for that drop was softness, specifically in their higher margin automotive fastener business. So even though aerospace was booming, the weakness in auto pulled the overall segment margin down.
Interesting mix of results within that one segment. Now, you mentioned innovation earlier. Companies always talk about it, but sometimes it's hard to see what it actually looks like, especially in, tools and construction. But you said there was something surprising here.
Yeah, this is where it gets really cool, I think. It's the DeWalt M Suite.
M Suite? What's that?
It's essentially a cloud-based management software. Think of it as a high-tech tool specifically designed to help trade contractors involved in construction.
Okay, software for builders.
Sort of. Its main job is to improve coordination between BIM, that's building information modeling, basically the complex digital blueprint of a project.
Right, the 3D model with all the data.
Exactly. Between BIM, the fabrication workshops where things like ducts or pipes are pre-made, and the actual construction teams out in the field. It tracks, manages, and shares data across the whole project lifecycle.
Okay. Sounds useful. What's the surprising part?
The surprising part came in May when they launched a specific tool within this suite, the M Suite Hangers automation tool. This thing completely changes how mechanical, electrical, plumbing, MEP contractors and industrial contractors handle the layout and modeling of hangers, the things that hold pipes and ducts to the ceiling.
Okay, hangers. How does it change it?
Here's the jaw dropper. What traditionally involved 10 separate manual steps within the BIM design process is now done in a single automated step.
Wait, 10 steps down to 1?
10 down to 1, automatically.
That's not just incremental improvement. That's a massive leap in efficiency.
Exactly. Think about the time savings, the reduction in potential errors. Anyone who's dealt with complex designs knows how huge that is.
Yeah, absolutely. What else does it do?
Well, it also automatically adjusts if the main building model changes. It can rapidly create complex hanger configurations, and it generates the bill of materials needed for fabrication. All of this boosts accuracy and cuts down on costly mistakes.
And it links to their hardware, too.
Yep. It integrates with DeWalt hardware like their anchors and tough wire cable management systems, so it connects the digital design directly to the physical installation.
So connecting this back, this isn't just a gadget. This is DeWalt selling productivity, selling accuracy, selling a way for their customers to be more competitive by saving massive amounts of time and reducing errors.
Precisely. It's building an ecosystem. They're not just selling you a drill, they're selling you a smarter way to build, empowered by technology, integrating software and hardware. It expands the whole scope of what they offer. That's strategic innovation.
Really fascinating stuff. Okay, so looking ahead now, what are Stanley Black Decker's sort of planning assumptions for the rest of 2025 and maybe into 2026? What does the financial road ahead look like, especially with those tariffs still hanging around?
Right. The outlook. For the full year 2025, they expect total company sales to retract slightly compared to 2024. For the second half of the year, they're planning for organic revenue to be relatively flat year over year.
Okay, so not expecting a big rebound in the back half, but stabilizing. What about margins? That seemed to be the focus.
Absolutely. On the gross margin front, they do expect year-over-year expansion in adjusted gross margin in both Q3 and Q4, and they think Q4 will be slightly stronger than Q3.
And that big 35% goal.
That ambitious goal of hitting 35% or more adjusted gross margin, they still call it a key milestone of success. But the timeline has slipped. They're now targeting reaching the mid-30s by the back half of 2026. They explicitly said the tariffs caused about a 9 to 12-month delay in reaching that goal.
Ah, okay, so still the target, just pushed out a bit by the tariff headwinds.
Exactly. For the full year 2025, though, they do expect adjusted EBITDA margins to expand compared to last year. And adjusted EPS is projected to be around $4.65 for the full year.
And cash flow and debt.
They're targeting about $600 million in free cash flow for 2025. That's supported by disciplined inventory management, not building up too much stock, and keeping capital expenditures under control. And deleveraging, paying down debt, remains a top priority. The goal is to get their net debt down to 2.5 times adjusted EBITDA or less.
How are they planning to do that?
The plan is to use excess free cash flow, plus they're aiming to raise between $500 million and $1 billion from what they call portfolio pruning, basically selling off non-core parts of the business and use that cash specifically for debt repayment.
Okay, disciplined approach there. Now, one last area. Beyond the financials, big companies like this often face, external legal or regulatory things.
Yeah.
Is there anything noteworthy on Stanley Black Decker's radar there?
Yeah, there are a few items they disclose, things that represent potential future complexities, though they emphasize they're in early stages.
Like what?
Well, there's an ongoing matter with the Consumer Product Safety Commission, the CPSC. The CPSC recommended a civil penalty of around $32 million related to product safety reporting, and they referred it to the Department of Justice. Stanley Black Decker disputes the claims, but it's out there.
Okay. Anything else?
There are also some class action and derivative lawsuits that have been filed. These generally allege false or misleading statements were made about consumer demand for their products in the past.
Those often follow stock price drops.
They can, yeah. And then separately, there are various environmental cleanup liabilities related to old manufacturing sites, like places called Centerdale and the Lower Passaic River. They have reserves set aside for these, but they acknowledge there are still uncertainties about the final costs.
So basically, a few legal and environmental issues simmering in the background.
Right. And the company's official stance is that these are all in early stages, and they cannot assess the likelihood of any potential loss or adverse effect right now. So even if they can't put a number on them yet, these kinds of things are always part of the broader picture for a company this size, aren't they? They're like these underlying currents that influence decisions, even if they aren't in the quarterly results directly.
That's a really good way to put it. They add a layer of complexity beyond just the operational and market factors. They require management attention, legal resources, and factor into the overall strategic risk assessment, even when the outcome is uncertain.
Okay, well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Stanley Black Decker. Quite a journey. What we've really seen is a company navigating some really significant changes, new leadership stepping in, this huge, ambitious transformation program, a major strategic battle against tariffs.
Right, and delivering a, pretty solid Q2 performance given how tough the environment is, all while keeping a disciplined eye on their financial future. And their stated focus, it really remains firmly on leveraging what they see as their strong foundations, those iconic brands like DeWalt, Craftsman, and their innovation engine like the M Suite to thrive going forward.
So here's a final thought for you, our listener, to maybe chew on. As Stanley Black Decker works through this complex mix of internal transformation and external pressures, think about how their focus on agility, shifting production, innovating, managing costs, and these multi-pronged strategies to fight tariffs, how that might actually become a kind of blueprint for other big global industrial companies facing similar headwinds in the years ahead. What stands out to you as the most critical factor for their long-term success? Is it the cost-cutting, the innovation, the leadership change? Something to consider.